Hello and welcome to Transfermarkt and to another daily transfer news live stream. There's plenty to talk about today as a host of European clubs are interested in Manchester United's Marcus Rashford, but he's not the only one rumoured to be on the way out of Old Trafford in the next few months. I'm joined this morning by Stefan to walk through the medley of transfer news. Stefan, how are you getting on this morning?
Yeah, very well. Glad to be a last minute substitution for Ewan and Ben today. But yeah, looking forward to jumping into some interesting transfer stories and some frankly ludicrous transfer stories.
Well, look, you've definitely chosen a good day to come in as a sub. Like you mentioned, there is some quite bizarre stories, and I do want to start with the news about Marcus Rashford. And it's been in the media the last day or so that both Bayern Munich and Marseille have joined PSG in the race to sign the English forward from Manchester United. After what was a very difficult season for him last year, he's in patches refound a little bit of form. He's got 4 goals and 3 assists in 12 games this season, which is already half the amount of goal contributions he actually managed in the entire of the last term. I want to first of all take a look at the Bayern Munich angle, because this is a new element to the story. What are your thoughts on Bayern being linked with this star from United?
If I'm being perfectly honest, it seems like a very lazy rumor. Bayern obviously went out and spent a lot of money on Michael Olise in the summer to kind of shore up their attacking lineup. He's done tremendously well at Bayern. In fact, he's probably been the best attacking player. I'd go so far to say he's probably been better than Musiala, who struggled with inconsistency and injuries so far this season. So Bayern have very quickly had to learn to rely on Michael Olise. There's definitely going to be a lot of turnover at Bayern in the front line. Both Kingsley Coman, Serge Gnabry, but perhaps most notably Leroy Sané are all kind of expected to move on in some form or another in the next 12 to 18 months. So I can understand why some people maybe look at that and think, well, Bayern might be looking for a left winger. They might be looking to bring in a player who can kind of shore up that left side, which obviously Rashford has been doing for Manchester United for a number of years now. But I'm not entirely sure it would be within Bayern's typical kind of purview to go pick up a player who's on extraordinary wages by Bayern, even by Bayern standards, really, at Manchester United. He's struggled for form for a number of years. And you could maybe even make an argument that if he's not in his peak years now, he's perhaps certainly looking back on them, just because of the nature of the type of player that he is. Those kind of explosive forward players usually kind of peak early 20s. So I'd be very surprised that I can see why Bayern might be in the market for a left-sided forward next summer, but I'd be very surprised if it was Marcus Rashford, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think you need to look at the money it will take to convince Man United to sell. Rashford has 4 years left in his contract, or it'll be 3 years by next summer. And while he's not the most informed player, he's a player that Eric Ten Hag at the moment trusts a lot. And we don't know who's going to be in the dugout for Man United 1 week to the next, never mind 9 months down the line. But he's a player that a lot of managers have trusted. And if we're to believe that Bayern Munich's big plan at the moment is to convince Florian Wirtz to stay in Germany and make that move to the Allianz Arena, I don't think the finances are going to be there to bring in two of those players. Like you said as well, with the big deals last summer for Michael Olise and Joao Palhinha as well. The PSG angle, it's one that it's been going on for quite a while, and like you said there, it seems like an easy rumor to put out. I would put the same on the rumor for PSG. Now look, we know PSG need forwards. They need to replace Kylian Mbappe. Randall Colomouani hasn't had the best time there, and even he could be on the way out. So again, I can understand that why PSG might be looking for a player in that position. But let's wait and see how it pans out. Look, we don't know. Rashford could end up staying at Man United to the end of that contract in 2028. He could be there even longer. It's not set in stone that a player who's come up through the system like him is ever going to leave the club.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's wait and see how
Could
it
I,
pans
could,
out. Go ahead.
could I just maybe add one extra thing to that, Matt? All I would also say is that I think at this point in time, it's probably more likely that Man United would replace the head coach and bring in someone who could give the assurances that they get the best out of Rashford next season, rather than obviously selling him for the sake of Ten Hag or for the sake of whatever Ten Hag's trying to build at Manchester United. He's still got a lot of kind of cachet. He's still got a lot of goodwill among Man United fans. He's obviously an academy player. I think the club itself obviously still value him very highly. So I'd be very surprised if they were willing to kind of draw a line under his career at Old Trafford. And it makes more sense if the next head coach comes in and that's one of his main priorities, to get Rashford back up and running rather than simply selling him in the summer, I think.
And if we move to Man United's front line, the other side of their front line, I think there's a player who's in a very different situation. And again, rumours in the last day or so have said that Manchester United are prepared to entertain loan offers in January for Brazil winger Antony. And Stefan, we did a video last week about Antony's market value development. He's the biggest market value loser over the last I think it's 18 months. And you did mention during that video that you could potentially see a loan for Antony in January as United just try to maybe get him to find a little bit of form before potentially making a permanent sale down the line. I guess you're not really surprised by this one, are you?
No, not at all. I think the kind of final nail in the coffin of Anthony's career was when Ten Hag stopped playing him, which has certainly been the case this season. He seemed to be his kind of one and only cheerleader at Manchester United over the last kind of 18, 24 months. And it's a shame that hasn't worked out for him at Man United. I think someone will probably write a good book on it one day as to why things haven't really worked out. But he just doesn't seem like the right player for the right position for the right club right now. And as we mentioned on the wider video we did on this channel on Anthony not too long ago, he does kind of have those stats to suggest he might be better placed in a kind of more defensive counter-attacking team where he can kind of really run into space, and he's kind of got players to link up with in kind of a quicker, more kind of intuitive way than he does at Manchester United, where he often seems to be out wide on his own. No other Man United player around him for 40 yards, and he's just kind of tasked with beating a few players and sticking the ball in the back of the net, which very few players in the world can actually do on a regular basis. So yeah, I think Crystal Palace were one of the clubs that were most notably linked with him, and yeah, that would make a lot of sense to me.
I also want to just refer to one point I made in that video, which I think in the age of social media when it comes to football is something that's often overlooked, is that he doesn't have to be the best player in the world or the worst player in the world. I think people often go to the extremes with their opinions. There is a good footballer in there. There's a reason that Man United paid as much money they did. And look, I don't think they ever should have paid that amount of money, but there is a good player in there. He showed that at Ajax. He showed it in very rare glimpses, to put it mildly, at Manchester United. So for him, hopefully a move away could be what his career needs, and he can pick back up where he left off at Ajax. A third player in that United front line who's been rumoured to maybe be on the way out, and maybe a bit of a surprise for some, is Joshua Zirkzee. And there's rumours that he could leave on loan in January with Juventus among the clubs interested. Now, I don't think he'd disagree with us that he's not had the best start to life in Manchester since he scored the winner on his debut against Fulham. He's gone 10 games now without any goal contributions, and with Rasmus Højlund coming back from injury, I think we're already starting to see that pecking order that Højlund is the main man up top for United, and Zirkzee maybe just a backup to him at the moment. Are you surprised that this early on in Zirkzee's career there's talk of Man United, or of a departure from Man United, even if it is just temporary? Or are you looking at the way he started at Old Trafford and thinking, well, maybe it's destined to not work out?
It's a tricky one. I mean, I'm not surprised at all. It's Manchester United, and if you have 3 or 4 bad games, you're very quickly in the back pages being linked with the exit door. Zirkzee's an interesting one because I actually think he was probably brought to Manchester United to play alongside Højlund. If you kind of watch out how he did in Serie A, he was more of a kind of second striker, player who liked to drift into number 10 position. That's kind of how he got that goal. I think it was on his debut, actually, he scored that goal. Was it Fulham, if I'm not mistaken? My memory hasn't lost me just yet. And that's kind of where he likes to play. He likes to make deep runs into the box. He likes to kind of link up the midfield and attack. And I think that's probably where Man United need him, because I would go so far as to say that Bruno Fernandes has probably been one of their biggest disappointments this season, which is a huge problem for Man United because it relies so much on him for goals and assists. And they really need Zirkzee in there to kind of pick up the slack. But they can't really do that unless they have a focal point up front, which, as you said, Højlund has been missing for most of the season. So I'd probably be reserved to kind of write up Xerxes Man United obituary just yet. I'd probably give him maybe until the end of the year to have a handful of games alongside Højlund, and then maybe we might see that kind of partnership kind of blossom, and all of a sudden Man United might have a functioning attacking line, which I'm sure seems like a far gone fantasy right now for Manchester United fans. But yeah, I would wait and see how he links up with Højlund, because I think that's primarily what he's brought to the club. Man United should have 2 or 3 backup strikers for the size of the club, the size of the squad. They just don't for some bizarre reason. And things do seem to fall apart without Højlund. But let's see how he does with Zirkzee before linking him with the move. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see, because the thing we have to remember about Zirkzee is that he was tremendous in Serie A and he was beloved by the fans out there, but he didn't really rack up a lot of goals and assists. He's the kind of player that only really passes the eye test for players who watch the games, or fans who watch the games rather. And if you look at him on paper, he looks like quite an average player. So it'll come down to how he does in those games specifically with Højlund, and whether the fans and Ten Hag can appreciate what he's doing.
I think with a story like this, it could definitely be born from the fact that I think United fans have grown quite frustrated with him in the first kind of 10 games of his Man United career. And of course you need a caveat that it's a new league for him, it's a new team, everything is new. So it's going to take some time to settle in. Maybe the expectations were heightened a little bit after he did score the late winner on his debut, which would have made them fall in love with him very, very quickly. But of course, there are glimpses of what he can do. I think his link-up play at the top for Man United has been really good. His first touch is fantastic. I think maybe he's just lacking a little bit of the physicality, especially his pace. Maybe it's something that you rely on a little bit more with the speed of Premier League football than he would in Serie A. But again, yeah, like you said, let's just give him time and let him settle in before we start to throw around our judgments and decide where his future lies. But again, like Anthony, that there's a player in there, and it's just about United being able to extract that. But there'll be more hope for it with Joshua Zirkzee for sure. Onto a story about a manager, and one who was heavily in the media last summer, and it's going to be the same next summer, because according to Sky in Germany, Bayer Leverkusen are preparing for the departure of Xabi Alonso next summer. Real Madrid are one of the clubs interested, and the other is Manchester City, who are still waiting to find out where the future of Pep Guardiola lies. It's no surprise, Stefan, that the big clubs are looking at Xabi Alonso, and if there's going to be a departure from Leverkusen, that maybe a team like Real Madrid could be willing to part ways with Carlo Ancelotti to bring in their next big manager. If you had to guess now, and I know it's very early in the whole saga, but where do you think Xabi Alonso would be best suited next season?
Well, very few players aren't suited to Manchester City, but they are the best in their field. That's the thing that Manchester City do very well. You can say what you want about the money they spend and how they spent it, I suppose, and where they got it from. But when it comes to actual player signings, and of course Pep Guardiola himself, just about everyone works very well it's a very well-oiled machine. So you can obviously see the appeal of Manchester City for someone like Xabi Alonso, especially since he plays a very similar style of football to Pep Guardiola at Manchester City. So it wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility to imagine Alonso kind of slotting in for Pep Guardiola and things just kind of tumbling along as normal. There's also interesting kind of not predicaments, but kind of developments with the clubs that have been traditionally linked with him. There's obviously the big three based on his playing career. There's Liverpool, Bayern Munich, and Real Madrid. Liverpool obviously appointed Arne Slot this season. He's doing tremendously well there, and it seems unlikely that he's going to move on anytime soon. Bayern Munich actually went in for Xabi Alonso this year, and he said thanks but no thanks. So they eventually had to settle for Vincent Kompany, who's actually done a relatively decent job at Bayern. So again, unless he gets sacked at the end of the season, it seems unlikely that it'll be Bayern Munich. And then, of course, as you said, there's Real Madrid, who presumably stuck with Carlo Ancelotti for another year because he did the Champions League trophy, which is no mean feat, obviously. So you can't exactly ask a head coach to step down after winning the Champions League. And of course, the players, as in typical Ancelotti fans, and the players all seem to adore him, and they seem to be doing relatively well there. So I guess the most likely situation is that maybe Ancelotti steps down into this season if things don't quite go to plan. And then obviously Xabi Alonso can slot straight in there. But unless that happens, I actually think all roads probably do lead to Manchester City right now, because if you take Liverpool and Bayern out of the equation, there's very few clubs with the scope and the infrastructure that Manchester City can offer Xabi Alonso, which is a clear path to trophies either in England or in Europe. And that's obviously what he wants. He wants to go to a club that he can do what he wants to do and win trophies. And between Real Madrid and Manchester City, I'm struggling to think of any other clubs that can offer that for Alonso.
And there's been an interesting story that's come out about Man City's interest in Alonso over the last couple of days. And when Mikel Arteta left Manchester City as Pep's assistant to move to Arsenal back in 2019, apparently Pep Guardiola's number one choice for his new assistant manager was Xabi Alonso, but he just couldn't tempt him at the time. And I think it's maybe a very interesting collision of different courses, because the day that Mikel Arteta was appointed at Arsenal, Carlo Ancelotti was appointed at Everton, and they can now be replacing, or Xabi Alonso can now be replacing Ancelotti at Real Madrid. So things have definitely changed quite a lot. But I do take your point that Real Madrid, of course, couldn't ask Ancelotti to leave after winning the Champions League. And for me, I was quite surprised that Alonso stayed at Leverkusen for this season. I think with managers who overachieve in certain, and it can go for players as well, when you overachieve in a season like Alonso did, some of the records that he set last season, he's at the moment has the best points per game in the top 5 leagues since the start of last season, the longest unbeaten run in the top 5 leagues since 2000, the first unbeaten Bundesliga title, and crucially Leverkusen's first Bundesliga title. Staying an extra year, if things don't go to plan, your stocks can drop very quickly. But maybe if Real Madrid and Alonso had an informal deal, which they'll never admit to, of course, but because you couldn't let Ancelotti go after a Champions League title. Maybe that was the plan all along, that Alonso would step in a year later. But the fact is, whatever club managed to get Alonso, we're getting a phenomenal manager, and of course one of the potential best in the next era of managers that are coming through in the game, because what he's achieved at Leverkusen has been absolutely immense, and we'd be hoping that maybe he can retain that Leverkusen title, keep the dream going on. But yeah, it's just important to know there that the story at the moment is that he is expected to leave Leverkusen at the end of the season. The final transfer story, and surprisingly back to Manchester United, but also Chelsea are involved in this one, and the two Premier League clubs are interested in Barcelona's 25-year-old Uruguay defender Ronald Araujo. For those who don't know him, if you're not an avid watcher of La Liga, he's like I said, 25-year-old centre-back from Uruguay playing for Barcelona, has 2 years left on his contract, and his Transfermarkt market value is €70 million, and has been for the last 18 months. I think from a United perspective, any centre-back they're linked with at the moment is good news, because with the injury concerns they're having, it's a never-ending disaster for Erik ten Hag at the moment. And Chelsea, well, they're just always looking to buy new players. But in terms of the player that they have reportedly identified, Stefan, do you think Ronald Araujo is the type of profile that can make that move to the Premier League?
Yeah, I think he can. I think he's a tremendous talent. He's an outstanding defender. And, as a result, I think Barcelona would be very keen to keep him at the club. If you kind of look at the way they've been playing this season, they've been really lucky in the way that Kabasi's kind of emerged as this outstanding young central defensive partner. He's basically been ever present at the heart of that defence, and Hansi Flick has kind of had to use a kind of supporting cast of Eric Garcia, Christensen, Martinez, these kind of older players who aren't exactly what I would call top tier central defenders by any means. And it kind of feels like Barcelona are waiting for Araujo to return from an injury, a very nasty hamstring injury, which has ruled him out for the entire season so far. And their long-term plans would be Araujo and Kubasi, obviously, alongside each other at the heart of that defence. So it might be well and good that Manchester United and Chelsea want Araujo. I'd be very surprised if Barcelona would be willing to oblige them in that. But as you said, it would make perfect sense for Manchester United to go out and bring another player in. They obviously signed two central defenders this summer. I was quite surprised that they maybe didn't try and spend a little bit more, perhaps obviously limited by FFP rules in England, but they are still very reliant on kind of older players and players who maybe haven't quite lived up to the expectations. Harry Maguire is probably the most obvious one, but Johnny Evans has also had to already played quite a lot of minutes this season, which may be quite concerning for Man United fans. Not that he's done a bad job of it, I must say, but it's a bit bizarre that a club of that size are relying on a player like that, of that age. But injury have obviously played its part. Euro obviously would play a long-term role in that team. You'd think the Ligt would obviously settle in as well, although he has had quite a bumpy start. And then maybe another third player like Araujo would obviously be the perfect situation. But as we know, football in real life is not Football Manager, and it's all well and good just clearing out your decks and bringing in an exciting player from Barcelona. But I think in real life, Barcelona would probably rather hold on to this one.
And I can't see why Ronald Araujo would want to leave Barcelona either. I think we all saw the business that Real Madrid have done, especially over the summer, bringing in Kylian Mbappe, but over the last couple of years, and expected maybe a period of dominance for them in La Liga with Barcelona's financial situation taken into consideration as well. But the players that have come out of La Masia over the last couple of years that are working incredibly well for Hansi Flick at the moment. Of course, they have the main, more experienced, more established stars of that team, but when you have under the age of 23, the players who've made a lot of appearances for Barcelona this season, you've Pedri, Lamine Yamal, Pau Cubarsí, as you mentioned, Alejandro Balde, who seems like he's been around for years, he's still only 21, Gerard Martin, Eric Garcia, Pau Victor. There's just so many in there. Pablo Torre as well. There's so many young stars coming through that team, and for a player like Araujo, who's 25 years of age at the moment, looking at the core of that squad that's coming through, if they keep developing the way that their trajectory is suggesting they will at the moment, it could be Barcelona who have that period of dominance in Spain, and maybe a little bit in Europe too, if they can manage to overhaul Real Madrid's dominance in the Champions League right now. So I think for Ronald Araujo, a move to the Premier League is always appealing to a lot of players, but I think Barcelona is the better place to be right now, and he's already, as you said, established himself as the main man in the defence there. So I think Man United and Chelsea will have a very big task on their hands if they want to convince him to leave the Camp Nou. The final story for today is about Everton, and they're reportedly preparing a bid for Besiktas's 19-year-old Turkish forward Semih Kılıçsoy. If you want to hear more about the youngster, do check out the video our colleague Ben did with Lara Karakan, one of our Turkish team. You can find that on the channel to learn all you need to know about Everton star. He's also been linked with Tottenham in the last couple of weeks as well. For those of you who have joined us during this live stream, thank you very, very much for tuning in. And for those who are watching the replay as well, we do appreciate your support on the channel. Make sure to subscribe down below if you want these daily live streams going forward to discuss the latest transfer news. And we'll also have plenty of videos on the channel talking about market value development, player profiles like our one with Semi Kiliksoy, and so much more. So I'm a little bit biased, but I do recommend you hit that subscribe button. But for now, from myself and Stefan, thank you very much for tuning in.